As a truck driver, I was driving on State Route 471 in Florida, which goes from Wildwood to Lakeland, around 0200. I've always heard that this area has high volume of Sasquatch sightings, but I have never seen anything. The 471 does run right through the green swamp. On this particular morning, I was en route to Lakeland for a delivery when I spotted on the side of the road, maybe 20 yards away, something standing bipedal. Its eye shine is what I first noticed. Now, sitting in a semi, I'm roughly 6 to 7 feet up in the air. I was roughly eye level with whatever I was seeing. It turned to its left, looked directly at me, then it just walked right back into the woods. I never stopped. Is this a confirmed sighting? No. I've lived in Florida since I was 6 years old in 1977. I'm a former Boy Scout. I was a Scout Master for my son's troop. I still hike and camp with my family, so I'm familiar with the outdoors. I've never seen anything like this before. I'm not sure that I wish to see it again. These are ancient creatures that should be left alone. This was last spring. I was up around 2 a.m. sitting out back, and I hear a baby fawn or a deer crying, running through the woods. As it's coming closer, it darts to its left directly toward me. Just as soon as I took a step off of a clearing for power lines into a water catch basin, it immediately gets snatched up from crying to silence in the darkness only about 30 feet away. I hear lunging through the thick weeds off to my left and in a direction back on the clearing. Then 10 seconds of silence, broken only by a very loud, very distinct bipedal walking. And as I stand up, I can't believe what I'm hearing, just because of the location. For some reason, I hear a whistle. Then it stops, dead silent. Only as I watch the legs moving directly in front of me, just on the outside edge of the shadow of the porch light, do I realize that it had moved in complete silence. It backs through the catch basin to check me out. I'm inside the door at this point, peering with only my head barely out the door. And it starts away with that walk in a complete other direction it came from, as if it didn't want me to know where it was going. Strange, yet clearly utilizing the clearings to flush out prey. I was building cabins in Gregg, Alaska. I was going to the bathroom by 1 a.m. I saw a Bigfoot who was standing on a staircase, looking through the living room window. It scared me to the bone because it didn't want to believe what I was seeing. Went into the bathroom, pissed, came back out of the bedroom, and it was gone. Same thing this time, I see it in the window. I'm trying to wake my friend so he could look out. Took off my window for 1 second, and it was gone. I actually saw a Bigfoot family in 1968 when I was 12 years old. I was herding with my dad in the San Juan Mountains, western Colorado. Riding my horse, and about 60 yards across the canyon, I saw a family of 6. I couldn't really believe what I was seeing. I watched them for about 20 minutes. My horse scared them, then they were gone in an instant. I still remember it like it was yesterday. Saturday on Labor Day weekend, 17 people out at the campsite during the day. Kids playing, we are loud. Come night, there are 8 of us left. Not all of us were camping. My wife sees someone in the parking lot next to the campsite, 30 feet away. I think it's one of the guys in the group, big guy, 6 foot 5 inches tall, but he's just out of sight of her sitting in a square. My back is to the parking lot and she is sideways where she can see most of us. Standing at the back, second truck in, she keeps asking, "Where's Mike?" Everybody keeps saying Mike is right there. Who's in the parking lot then? No one. We keep telling her. No one had been over there in over an hour. Darla comes over there, and all she sees is a reflection of the taillights. She's looking over by the fire. The moon had come up from behind it and made a good outline of this guy. She finally asked out loud, "Mike, is that you in the parking lot?" Ken says, "No, he's right here." That's when we all jumped up. I spun around, and by that time of me jumping up and spinning around, it moved another 30 feet back. It was towering over a Dodge Caravan. I could see the outline and two red glowing eyes staring at me. 7 feet off the ground. Someone yells, "Where's the spots lights?" I looked down, and it moved into the woods. We all grabbed our lights and headed to where it was at. We find a spot next to the truck where it peed on the ground and on the back tire. 2-foot diameter spot. Wife rubs her hand in it. Sure enough, it's pee. We go back to look in the woods and we hear talking. At first, I think this thing's rapping at us. No one is talking to some others. All that night is dead quiet. About 4:30, I hear tree knocks, calling them in. It's about an hour before daybreak. They're very intelligent. They have language. They live in groups. This is just one of many encounters with them. Yelling, screaming, footprints, hearing them fight, eating the chicken I left out for them, smelling them. When one is close, you can smell it. They are real, and no one can tell me different. A man in Arizona was hiking with 2 women and saw what appeared to be a Sasquatch step down out of a tree, and another creature he said looked like a dog-type creature that stood on 2 legs as well. I'm assuming that's what people call God man. He then witnessed them communicating and making hand gestures. The Sasquatch then made a hand motion into the dog man towards the woman. Man took a photo and then yelled out. They both looked over him. He had a walking stick in his hand and pointed at it like a rifle. He said they looked at each other and ran faster than we've seen anything run. He thought for sure they were planning on attacking the 2 women. No wonder so many people go missing in national parks each year. I think some Sasquatch are benevolent and there are others that are malevolent. Bad intentions for us, especially the dogman creatures that we've encountered. It seems the case they were working together and communicating to each other. In the summer of 2016, a friend of mine were in the middle of the Superior National Forest trout fishing. There wasn't any form of civilization for miles. We were literally in the middle of nowhere. We pulled down a old logging road and parked in a small sand pit and walked a footpath to the river. We fished for maybe 2 to 3 hours, wading south through the river. We decided to leave and eat lunch. But instead of walking through the river, we accessed the bank and found a footpath that led in the same direction of where we'd parked. We made our way through the woods and a cane across a small area of thick, dense moss. We noticed a huge bed. I think it was created by a moose until we saw the footprint next to it. Couldn't make out the toes, but it looked like Shaquille O'Neal took his shoe off and walked barefoot. My buddy's boots are size 13, and the print dwarfed it. To the right was a very large pile of scat. I've seen bear scat, and yes, they do, in the woods. This pile was coiled unlike a bear. We looked at each other in disbelief. We left that trip changed. When I was 11 years old, my granddaddy and I were in a place called Sweetwater. We was hunting gators in early morning. I don't remember the time. It wasn't sunlight yet. My granddaddy was using a spotlight to look for the shine of the gator's eyes. We heard a loud screech. It scared me. I almost tripped over the tackle box and fell out of the boat. My granddaddy shined the spotlight up on the tree line searching for what it was. My granddaddy was a tall man, 6'3". When he shined the light onto the bank, there was a man hunched over, but still looked much taller than him. I was so young though. It looked like a giant. It had muscles too. But I figured out it wasn't a man when the spotlight hit its eyes. The eyes shine just like the gators do. At the same time I saw its eyes, it hulked a rock that I would venture to say was a small boulder into the river, almost hitting our boat. My granddaddy got us out of there. He never took me back to Sweetwater. My husband and myself went to a new camping site this weekend called Something Squatchy Adventures in Dungannon, Virginia. It's along the Clinch River. This is a very saturated area of Bigfoot sightings. Around 10 p.m. last night, we were sitting around a campfire listening to music when we heard a whooping sound. This was not a short, quick whoop. It lasted about 20 seconds and was loud enough to hear over the music playing. The sound came from the woods across the river. It was so distinct. My husband said it sounded like an ape. We both sat there in amazement of what we were hearing. Then around 4 a.m., while we were in our tent, we heard it again. We both have heard knocking, short whoops, even drumming sounds, but never such a long, distinct sound such as this. It was pretty spectacular. We spoke with the owners this morning and they stated that they hear the whooping sounds all the time, along with tree knocks. It was a female and 2 offspring that climbed up a pine tree about 60 feet away from us. We came across 3 dome-like shelters of gathered saplings, and I saw them running to hide from us, but I made sure not to tell the guys that were with us, or we probably wouldn't have came home in one piece. My dumb friends, they were idiots I had to babysit, started breaking all the sticks. It looked like they were picked and meant to build those shelters, when all of a sudden we heard a spine-tingling roar. We ran as fast as we could. I guess we found out why everyone at the campsite always stressed not to ever cross to the other side of the stream, to avoid coming in contact with the local giants. My husband, me, 3 of our friends went camping one night, and around dusk, a bat kept flying and screeching over our campfire. We tried everything to make it go away. Then, when it was all the way dark, we started hearing these howls coming from all directions, surrounding us. My husband and one of our friends shot 2 shots from their guns to make whatever go away. This didn't work. Now even the pit bull is climbing into the owner's lap. So then the howling got closer. We started hearing something behind us. The guys turned on their light bars and something took off into the woods, breaking trees in half. The guys chased it, but no luck. After that, everything went silent. Even the bat went away. I'll never forget the sound of that howl or the hair on the back of my neck standing up. My profession is a paranormal investigator. One day I was out doing investigations at an old Confederate cemetery in southeastern Ohio. When I was setting up my equipment, I noticed trash from kids that party up there, so I started to clean it up. After I took a trip meter out looking for EMF, at which time a number 2 stone was thrown at me. Then another one. It almost hit me. I looked up and I saw this 9-foot hairy thing on 2 feet and mock charged me. I back up to my car, pop the trunk, pull out my .40 caliber. It was gone. It must have knew what I was thinking about. My sighting in Shahoua, Pennsylvania was on Twin Lakes Road, Friday, April 17th, 2014. I had gotten out of work very late and was driving down Twin Lakes around 10:30. Normally, I'd have to flip my brights off when other cars were coming my way. This was not the case this night, as other cars were not on the road. I was coming around a bend, and as I did, I was crossing into trees on the other side of the road. It was a very quick encounter. A few seconds later, I had missed it. I saw it clearly, though. It was huge. The head was conical, like others describe, and the arms were very long. It's an image that's forever in my brain. I just kept thinking, what did I just see? I called my husband to tell him. Still in shock. The next day, we went looking for prints, as there was some snow. Sure enough, there was one. Pennsylvania Bigfoot man came out a few weeks later to investigate. I found out there were 2 other sightings in that area in the past. It was an amazing experience. I grew up next to a horse farm in southeast lower Michigan. My family owned 126 acres. We had a junkyard full of old cars. And at the back of the property, there was a dump. It's where all the family brought their old crap to get rid of. Beyond the dump was a great woods, a 300-acre block. Well, us kids would go back, dump our bikes, or on horseback. I always had a feeling I was being watched. I never went back there by myself, put it to you that way. So fast forward 8 to 10 years, I was 17 or 18, I started bow hunting. Us kids knew the block like the back of our hand. This was where we grew up. My little sister and her friend also had an encounter that could not be explained. No one's seen anything, but your mind could only wonder. So I was hunting one night and fell asleep in my tree stand. Had a 12-foot ladder stand. It was dark in the woods and almost dark in the field. When I felt something touch my boot. My head was slouched down. When I opened my eyes, our faces were 4 feet apart. I honestly had no time to react. It screamed so loud, I could feel my ladder vibrating. It ran away from me, so I couldn't see it anymore, just hear it. I won't leave this out. I did piss my pants. No cell phones at the time. I had about a half a mile walk or run back to my truck. I had never been back to those woods again, so my mom lived in Hillsdale County. That's where I hunted after. In 2000, I was 28. I hunted state land, more or less, because there were other people. And I swear I seen another one running through the woods, not 75 yards from me. I could hear its feet hit the ground with each step, branches breaking. I had my philosophy on the first one, but the second one, I know what I seen. I can't be certain, but I started driving over the road in 2008. And in 2009, I was in Flagstaff, Arizona, at a truck stop. I was up before daylight, outside the truck stretching, and my truck was backed up against the woods. I heard something whooping on the hillside. When I got back to my trailer, I seen something running up the side of the mountain/hillside. It could have been an elk or a moose. It was a couple hundred yards away. It's still kind of dark. I know what I seen the first 2 times. No one can say Sasquatch Bigfoot is not real. I seen it. All this nonsense of them teleporting and being aliens from another world, I believe they are everywhere. They don't communicate unless it's breeding season. I think they live underground and in caves. They do shelter. When I was a kid, my dad owned a hunting and fishing company. He would set out on a Thursday through Sunday and hunt in the Pacific Northwest and bring usually a single person or a couple with him. Inadvertently, a few times he ran into a Bigfoot or a family of Bigfoot over the years. I just remember how nonchalant he was about it and how he talked about it as matter of fact. My brother and I grew up knowing that Bigfoot was real. It wasn't until adults that we found out other people were skeptical. My dad has rules when we went out camping, and they were to be strictly followed out of respect for the Bigfoot in the area. We were always encouraged to laugh and have fun though. We were camping. Just our family when we heard howls, some type of grumbling noises. My dad is ex-military, so you can appreciate the strictness in his voice when he calmly gathered us to get inside. He told us that we had to wait out of respect. He told us we were not the only families that live here, and let's allow them to be curious. They just want to know about us. He said with most animals, he had to make sure we were safe and they were safe. I remember that camping trip so well because of it. I was so scared. Also, I finally beat him at Battleship that day. He gave me a freshwater pearl that he won a few weeks back in a card game, camping with a buddy. My dad passed away in 1993. I just love listening to his encounter stories. My river guide said one night he was doing a tour and saw a giant creature pushing through trees in the Panama City Swamp Lagoon. I've lived my whole life in southeastern Ohio, where I learned to hunt and trap. I'm a professional tracker and survival expert, spending most of my time in the woods. About a year ago, we were camping and heard a loud noise coming from deep in one of the hollows after hearing a loud banging noise and yell, like growling. We went off to investigate Never saw what was making the noise, but there were tracks, none of which I remember seeing in all my years tracking. They were not of a human nor of an animal. I remember being asked what I thought it was. My reply was whatever it was very big. I remember seeing hair in a barbed wire fence. Real coarse hair, reddish brown in color. We stopped and looked around for a while, seeing nothing, so I turned my dog loose. He could sense something was out there because he was eager to get off the chain. He smelt the hair and was given command to find. We went on a run the exact same direction of where the creature ran after. About 20 minutes. He was on trail. We followed him for 3 hours. We searched for whatever it was, and I called off the hunt. I will never forget the tracks or the sound of the creature running through the brush. I could tell it was on 2 feet to this day. Still can't explain what it was, but I do know it walked on 2 feet and was massive from the track size. The depth was probably around 200 plus pounds and at least 6 foot or more tall. Something out there that I know of. A couple years ago, I went on a hunting trip and planned on staying in the woods for a few days. Second night, dead asleep, I heard some sticks snapping and leaves crunching. It sounded like a person was approaching my camper. I didn't move. I wanted to be as quiet as possible. It sounded like it was right up against my camper. Then I heard some very rapid movements and grunting for about 4 minutes. Then it let out a low moan, and I could hear running. Once I was for sure it was gone, I grabbed a flashlight and went and looked around the camper. I found right under one of the windows there was this kind of gooey white stuff on the camper and on the ground. The next morning, I packed up my stuff and left. I was fishing in a creek. When the sun went down, I started hearing huge boulders whizzing through the air and splashing into the water. Some of the rocks were so big you could hear them hitting the bottom of the creek bed. It was time to get the you-know-what out of there when we heard it start stomping and the ground rumble. When I was 10 years old, my sister was in 4-H. She did barrel races and jumping, but my father made me go out there with her because in case you got hurt. This was 1977, midsummer, late in the day. I sat there for a while, watching her do her thing. Then all of a sudden, the horse started to panic. He wanted to haul ass to the barn. The horse started spinning in circles and snorting. She got off the horse and tried to hold on to the bridle. Seeing she was having trouble, I got up to help her hold the horse. He was having none of it. He pulled away from us and ran to the barn. We both looked at each other like, what just happened? We had a nice chunk of land. A lot of family and friends would bring up the brush and put it in this pile. It was about 150 yards away from us. As we looked towards the brush pile, a brownish red animal stood up. We had a swamp that butt up to the back of our course. It was all fenced in. This animal stood up, looked at us for a couple seconds, and started walking towards the fence. This thing just stepped right over the fence without breaking stride. A year ago, I was in the Cascade National Park in northern Washington. My daughters and I were taking pictures of the views, not too far from Ross Lake. We were startled by a loud, guttural scream. I scanned the area looking for the noise it came from. It happened a couple more times before my daughters convinced me to get in the car and go. I've seen imps, but no fairies. Saw them one night flying around trees. When I went outside, they disappeared. Went back in the house, they reappeared, but not as many. They glowed and seemed to be comforting me in that particular night. Definitely got my mind off a bad relationship. It was quite scary the first time. I went to put my hand up to this tree to grab what I thought was a normal leaf from the trunk of this old oak tree. And this being fluttered its wings. Looked exactly like normal tree leaves. It was green and brown in color, earth colors. Had long brown, spindly legs and arms which looked exactly like normal branch twigs. Approximately 12 inches in height and the same in its wing length. Yes, I've seen them as colorful lights in the dark, but I haven't seen them in years. I've had 2 encounters very close to the trail. One in 1969, one in 1993. My friend had one run up him from his camp, 2001. This happened at the foot of the Smoky Mountains in Tilico Plains. Found a stick/branch that was about 3 inches around at the biggest part, if not bigger, and has been stuck deep in the rocky, gravelly ground in a dry lake bed. Say it's got to be a foot deep because it takes some strength to move it back and forth. Back in the summer of '89, I was with a friend in the Colorado Rockies along a ledge overlooking the beautiful scenery, and far below, it looked like a creature of some sorts walking upright with tan fur color. I wish we had binoculars. In 1981, we were driving through Snowy Range, Wyoming. We were coming around a curve in the road. I saw eye shine. Then it ran to the road. I screamed and my friend slammed on the brakes. It put out its hand to try to stop us from hitting it. When she slammed on the brakes, I wasn't wearing a seatbelt. So I went right up to the windshield. So I was looking right at its eyes. It's at least 7 feet tall. I was about 5 feet away from it. It ran to the trees. My friend said, "Look to see where it went." I started to answer her when it let out this god-awful scream and yell at the same time. It was so loud, I felt it in my chest. It's been a long time, but I can still see its face. When I think of that scream, I get goosebumps. I know what I saw, and no one will ever convince me it was anything else. I did once when hunting alongside the edge of a tree line. Walked by at 75 feet, 7.5 to 8 feet tall, 450 to 500 pounds. I was upwind from him. I don't think he knew I was there. I used to work at a bowling alley, arcade, laser tag place. Apparently, someone had died there in the laser tag arena just under a year before I started working there. One night, we closed the arena for a few hours, and I had to clean the arena with some other employees. While we were cleaning, both the main lights and the decorative black lights went out, and the whole room was pitch dark. I was on the upper level of the arena when one of the guys behind me screamed at the top of his lungs. I saw that he was somehow barely dangling above the safety rail. He yanked his arm back before he fell. He was really freaked out. It said that something cold touched his back and pushed him. There have been other occasions where he's been injured or attacked by some unseen force while inside the arena. We all thought it was the ghost of the guy that died there. The employee later quit because he was almost seriously injured inside of that cursed arena. Had visitors and their kids liked my room because I had a massive bed that they could play. We thought they were there because they were noisy. One of the mothers was about to tell them to be quiet when all the kids came inside from the backyard asking for snacks. The noise from my bedroom was gone, and we asked the kids if they'd been in my room. They said no because they were told not to by someone. They didn't elaborate who that someone was. I was a kid, but a teenager, old enough to know that Santa Claus didn't exist. But one Christmas Eve was staying at my uncle's old farmhouse. In the middle of the night, I awoke to the sight of an old man looking exactly like the typical Santa. I was so confused and scared, so I just kept my eyes closed and eventually fell back asleep. Told my family about the mysterious Santa visit, and to my surprise, no one ridiculed me for thinking I saw Santa. Instead, they determined I was old enough to know the truth about the former owner of the farmhouse. He was a real person who was sadly found dead with suspicious conditions. Turns out my uncle had plenty of odd occurrences throughout his time living here. Never anything hurtful or violent, but definitely his presence was known. What really sealed the deal was when they showed me a picture of said previous owner, Saul. And what do you know? He had a remarkable resemblance to Santa. Rest in peace, Saul. When I was 17 or so, I took my dog outside to piss, and there was a large humanoid figure walking into the woods. It was sunset, so at first I thought maybe shadows in the tree line, but the hairs stood up on my dog's back like I've never seen, and she growled at it, didn't bark. I was kind of frozen a bit in fear, but also just in confusion what I was looking at. The neighborhood speed sign was near it for reference, so I'd say this thing was at least 10 feet tall. Long and lanky legs and arms, thick black fur. It didn't look in my direction, just a gentle stride right into the woods. I went back in immediately, told my parents, and they remember me doing this as well. It was in Missouri, an hour south of St. Louis. Obviously thought to Bigfoot, or apparently there is a monster called Momo. I have no idea what the F it was. When I was in college, I was walking across campus to an early morning class when this old white man with the bluest eyes I've ever seen stopped me to ask for some bus ticket money. Everything went still around us. No sounds. The air felt stiff. There was literally no one but us outside. This man's eyes were like aquamarine, but the rest of his face, it was like his skin was plastered on. His nose looked stuck on like clay. His cheeks looked like they were barely hanging on to whatever was underneath. He looked truly bizarre. He stops me and compliments my lipstick and asks if I could help him pay for a bus ticket so he could visit his son. I told him I didn't have any cash to help him. He never breaks eye contact and tells me he's a veteran and takes his wallet out to show me his military lapel. When he opens it, I see a wad of cash in there, and he looks at me again and asks if I could help. While all this was happening, the only thing I felt was that I was in danger. I truly thought I was in the presence of someone evil, even though he didn't say or do anything to provoke the feeling. I ended up reaching in my bag for quarters and gave them to him. He held my hand for what felt like forever and let me go on my merry way. I think it was an encounter a lot, because it felt like he was pretending to be human. His skin looked like it was made out of wet clay and wrongly placed. His eyes were so blue they looked unnatural. And why did he ask for money when you had it already? The 3-story house that I grew up in was built in 1965. My parents purchased the home in 1997, right before I started first grade. My parents, sister, and I lived upstairs, while my grandma lived on the second floor by herself. My grandma would babysit me while my parents were at work, so she would walk upstairs at least twice a day to check up on me. My grandma would always wear these slippers that were very heavy, so it was easy to hear her footsteps, even from downstairs. Must have been a Saturday or Sunday, since I didn't have school. I was by myself upstairs alone in my room, playing with my Game Boy, sitting with my back facing my bedroom door. I heard the unmistakable sound of Grandma walking up the stairs to check up on me. I heard her proceed up the stairs, walk down the hallway, stop in front of my door. Felt like she was about to say something, so I looked over to meet her gaze. But there was no one standing there. I instantly felt startled and ran out of my room to check the hallway and stairs. No one else was upstairs beside me. I found my grandma downstairs sitting on the couch, watching television. When I was 7, my family made a quick road trip to visit my grandma, who was in hospice. We got back home late, and my sister and I saw our grandma sitting in the rocking chair in our room. The rocking chair that had belonged to her husband. Our mom walked in and told us that grandma had died. We were going to drive back in the morning. My sister and I didn't mention it for years, but we were both absolutely certain Grandma stopped by to say goodbye. I once saw a homeless man walking toe to toe on the curb on a busy street. He heard a truck coming and bolted right in front of it. I saw the truck slam its brakes to avoid hitting the guy, but it wasn't possible because the truck was speeding. I looked away briefly because I didn't want to see the guy on the pavement and grabbed my phone to call 911. The guy wasn't on the pavement. He also wasn't on the other side of the street. He was gone. This was broad daylight, about 4 p.m. in the middle of the summer. The homeless guy looked like a solid body. There wasn't anything ghostly or shadowy about him, but just looked normal, real human being. Phantom whistling was followed by a tune. My brother and I, my sister, were singing Green Sleeves, very random, while doing dishes in the kitchen one summer. The whistle continued the tune for about 5 seconds after we finished singing, and it just dissipated. My sister and I can't whistle, and we all started staring at each other while the whistling occurred. My brother and sister immediately checked outside for a passerby. We live in the country, no neighbors, and if there was someone, we would have seen them for sure. Not to mention, the whistle is right in the kitchen with us. Well, I covered my ears and started to have a panic attack from fear. They checked inside the house for someone too. We couldn't explain it, still talk about it to this day. My parents still live there and continue to have odd experiences, but nothing to that level. We also tried singing in the same spots again to see if there was maybe an echo, but there was none. Time frame was back in 2010, 2011. I was a junior in high school. It was late Friday night, and I was home alone, and my parents were out of town. I was watching TV in the living room, our flat screen, when I had a really weird feeling where it got cold and I couldn't breathe for about 15 seconds. Shortly after this, my entire house flashed power. When the power came back on, every single one of the faucets was on, running cold water at full blast. I turned off upstairs once, got my stuff, and went to my girlfriend's house at the time. The basement water stayed on, and the next day, my parents yelled at me for leaving the water running. When I told them the story, they were suddenly not mad and just dropped it entirely. Still one of the weirdest things that ever happened to me in my house growing up. Not to only mention that it happened. Maybe I should ask my mom now as an adult. Well, this happened last night. There was a couple other things that happened to me before this, but nothing quite as intense as this. I was washing the dishes after dinner. My entire family went upstairs, except one of my pugs. He was standing in front of the stairs. When he turned around and looked at me with these wild eyes, he looked scared. Then he looked to face the darkest corner of the house and began barking. Scared the crap out of me. Finished cleaning and took the hallway past the pantry. Looked out the window and I could have sworn I saw this extremely sickly, pale figure just staring at me for a split second. I say this because as soon as we made eye contact, the lights went out. Not saying the power went out, the lights were fine. I ran back upstairs and booked it to my room. Talked to my father about that. He calls her Doña Helena. Alligators. A young woman in town married a man from another part of the country. He was a nice fellow, and they got along pretty well together. There was only one problem. Every night he'd go swimming in the river. Sometimes he'd be gone all night long, and she'd complain about how lonely she was. This couple had 2 sons. As soon as the boys could walk, their father began to teach them how to swim. And when they got to be old enough, he took them swimming in the river at night. Often they would stay there all night long. The young woman would stay home all by herself. After a while, she began to act in a strange way. At least that's what the neighbors said. She told them that her husband was turning into an alligator and that he was trying to turn the boys into alligators. Everybody told her there was nothing wrong with a man taking his son swimming. That was a natural thing to do. And when it came to alligators, there just weren't any nearby. Everybody knew that. Early one morning, the young woman came running into town from the direction of the river. She was soaking wet. She said a big alligator and two little alligators had pulled her in and had tried to get her to eat a raw fish. They were her husband and her sons, she said. They wanted her to live with them, but she had gotten away. Her doctor decided she had lost her mind, and he had her put in a hospital for a while. After that, nobody saw her husband and boys again. They just disappeared. But now and then, a fisherman would tell us about seeing alligators in the river at night. Usually it was one big alligator and two small ones, but people said they were just making it up. Everybody knows there aren't any alligators around here. Hey, I'm Connor from Bigfoot Anon, and I'm always on the hunt for the next big adventure. When you're on the trail for long hours, you build up quite the stench, enough to drive any skunk ape or yeti away. Luckily, I'm on the quest now for the solution to all my problems. Yeti bars. They do exist. Available in tons of different scents and fragrances. Check out YetiBars.net for more and use my code BA10 for a special offer. Clean like a beast. Yeti Bars!